The morning shift change at Harmony's Gate brought the usual chaos of 1,000 different species moving through corridors designed for beings that came in every shape imaginable. Ambassador Thalen watched from his office window as the Vorthek delegation prepared for another council session. Today would be different, though. Today they would vote on humanity. The proposal sat on his desk like a sleeping bomb. 16 pages of careful diplomatic language that boiled down to a simple question. Should they invite the humans to join the Galactic Confederation? Thalen had spent months studying these strange bipeds from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. What he found both fascinated and worried him. Humans had achieved faster-than-light travel in less than a century after their first spaceflight. Most species took 3 to 5 centuries to make that leap. The Confederation's xenobiologists called it statistically impossible. Yet here were the humans, zipping around their local star cluster in ships that looked like they were held together with determination and stubborn refusal to accept limitations. Thalen pulled up the surveillance footage from their first contact. 6 months ago, the human ship had appeared without warning in the Kepler system, completely ignoring the standard quarantine protocols that every civilized species followed when entering inhabited space. When the Althery patrol vessels had moved to intercept, the humans had actually sent a message asking if they needed help, as if 3 primitive primates in a barely functional spacecraft could assist the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. The memory still made Thalen's gill slits flutter with what his species considered amusement. The patrol commander had been so shocked that he had actually responded, leading to the first formal contact between humanity and the Confederation. Within hours, news of the contact had spread through the council chambers like wildfire. The humans were not just another primitive species stumbling into space. They were something entirely unexpected. Their technology was crude but innovative, in ways that made the Confederation's engineers nervous. Human ships use fusion drives that should have torn themselves apart under the stress, yet somehow remained functional through what appeared to be constant maintenance and creative problem solving. Their computers were generations behind Confederation standards, but programmed with an efficiency that impressed even the Althery computational specialists. What really caught the Council's attention was humanity's political structure. Most species that achieved interstellar travel had unified under a single global government. Humans had over 200 separate nation-states, dozens of competing corporations, and 3 different space agencies all launching missions simultaneously. By every measure the Confederation used to evaluate developing civilizations, humanity should have destroyed itself in nuclear fire centuries ago. Instead, they had somehow channeled their chaos into progress. Human colonies were already spreading through their local systems with a speed that made them methodical. Confederation expansion looked glacial. Each colony was different, trying new approaches to everything from agriculture to governance. Most failed, but the humans simply tried again with modifications. Thalen's door chimed, and General Ross entered without waiting for permission. The Krathan military commander moved with the fluid grace of a natural predator, his scales shifting color to indicate his mood. Today they were deep red with black edges, anger mixed with concern. "You cannot be serious about this proposal," Ross said, his translator giving his words a mechanical precision that somehow made them more threatening. "These humans are dangerous." "They are primitive," Thalen replied, keeping his voice steady. "Their most advanced weapons are barely capable of planetary bombardment. They pose no military threat to the Confederation. Physical weapons are not what concerns me." Ross activated the wall display, showing a compilation of human transmissions intercepted over the past months. "Listen to how they talk." The recordings played snippets of human communication, scientists debating theories with an intensity that bordered on aggression, politicians arguing over resource allocation as if every decision was a matter of life and death, artists creating works that challenged every assumption about reality. "They question everything," Ross continued. "Every system, every authority, every tradition. They have been in space for less than a century and already they're philosophers. are writing papers about the rights of artificial intelligences they have not even created yet. What happens when they encounter our systems? Fallon had read those papers. Human philosophy was strange, focused on individual rights and freedoms in ways that made collective decision-making almost impossible. Yet somehow they made it work. Human colonies governed themselves through systems so diverse that Confederation sociologists could not find a common pattern. Their diversity is their strength, Fallon said. Look at their innovation rate. They solve problems in months that take our specialists years to address. They solve problems by creating new problems, Ross snapped. Do you know what their first question was when they learned about the Confession Protocol? They asked why any species would voluntarily reveal their military capabilities to potential enemies. Not how it promotes peace, not how it builds trust. They wanted to know why we would give up strategic advantages. Fallon's gill slits closed slightly. The Confession Protocol was the foundation of Confederation peace. Every member species reported their military capabilities honestly, allowing the Council to mediate disputes before they escalated to violence. It had prevented major wars for over 3,000 years. Perhaps they simply need time to understand our methods, Fallon said. Or perhaps their methods will destroy our understanding, Ross replied. These humans do not think like civilized beings. They see cooperation as a choice rather than a necessity. What happens when they choose not to cooperate? The question hung in the air like a toxic gas. Fallon had no answer because he was not sure there was one. Human psychology was unlike anything in the Confederation database. They seemed capable of both incredible cooperation and devastating conflict. Often simultaneously, the council session was scheduled to begin in 2 hours. Representatives from 847 species would vote on whether to invite humanity into their alliance. Fallon looked out at the vast space station that housed the Confederation government and wondered if they were about to make the greatest mistake in galactic history. His communicator chimed with an urgent message from the human ship still waiting at the edge of the system. Captain Reed was requesting permission to address the council directly. The audacity was breathtaking. No species had ever made such a request during their membership evaluation. Fallon found himself smiling despite his concerns. Whatever happened next, it would certainly not be boring. He approved the request and began preparing for the most interesting council session in his very long diplomatic career. Dr. Emma Walsh had never seen anything like the Confederation Technical Archive. The vast digital library contained the accumulated knowledge of nearly 1,000 species spanning 3 millennia. As the newest members of the galactic community, humans had been granted basic access to help them integrate with existing systems. The Confederation expected them to spend decades simply learning to use what already existed. Emma and her team had downloaded and analyzed everything within 6 months. "This is wrong," said Dr. Tom Phillips, looking up from his workstation with the expression of someone who had just discovered their entire worldview was incomplete. "The energy distribution patterns in these power systems make no sense." Emma moved to his screen, studying the technical specifications for standard Confederation fusion reactors. Every ship and station used variations of the same basic design refined over centuries to achieve maximum efficiency. According to the documentation, they represented the peak of possible energy generation within known physical laws. "What specifically is wrong?" Emma asked. "Everything." Tom highlighted sections of the technical diagrams. "Look at the magnetic containment fields. They are using 17 different field generators when 4 would do the job better. The plasma injection timing is calibrated for maximum stability instead of maximum output. These designs are not optimized for efficiency. They are optimized for simplicity." Emma felt a familiar itch in her mind, the same feeling she got when confronted with a problem that had an elegant solution hiding just out of sight. "Show me the historical development data." Tom pulled up the design evolution charts. The early Confederation reactors had been crude but showed rapid improvement over the first few centuries. Then the innovation suddenly stopped. For over 2,000 years, changes had been minimal, focused on minor stability improvements rather than fundamental advances. It is like they deliberately stopped trying to make them better. Tom said. Emma's communicator buzzed with an urgent message from the xenobiology team. Dr. Lisa Chun was requesting an immediate meeting about the Confederation medical database. Emma found her in the genetics lab, surrounded by displays showing DNA sequences from dozens of different species. "We have a problem," Lisa said without preamble. "The Confederation has treatments for genetic diseases that they are not using." "What do you mean?" Lisa activated a holographic display showing the genetic markers for a condition called Vorthic wasting syndrome. The disease affected millions of Vorthek each year, causing progressive muscle deterioration and eventual death. Confederation medical files showed centuries of research into treatments with limited success. "I found the complete genome sequences for affected populations," Lisa continued. "The disease is caused by a simple enzyme deficiency. We could synthesize a cure in weeks using basic genetic therapy techniques. Techniques that the Confederation developed centuries ago but apparently never applied to this specific problem." Emma stared at the data, her mind racing. "Have you checked other diseases?" 17 different conditions across 12 species. All of them treatable with existing Confederation technology. All of them still listed as incurable in official medical databases. The implications made Emma's stomach clench. Either the greatest scientific alliance in galactic history was incompetent on a scale that defied belief, or something else was happening. Something that made her deeply uncomfortable. Her personal communicator chimed with a priority message from Captain Reed. The Council had approved a human request to establish independent research colonies outside their assigned sector. 3 uninhabited systems had been made available for human settlement. The news should have been exciting. Instead, Emma felt a growing sense of unease. That evening, the human delegation gathered in their quarters aboard Harmony's Gate. Captain Reed looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from navigating diplomatic waters where every word had consequences he could not fully understand. "The Confederation has been very generous," he began. "They have given us access to technologies that will advance human civilization by centuries. They have offered us protection from potential threats and inclusion in the greatest alliance in galactic history. By every measure, we should be grateful." "But," asked Dr. Walsh. "But they keep asking us to stop asking questions," Reed replied. "Every technical inquiry gets redirected to official documentation. Every historical question gets answered with standard educational materials. Every suggestion for improvement gets filed for review by committees that apparently never meet." Tom Phillips activated his portable display, showing the reactor efficiency calculations he had been working on all day. One submitted a proposal for a 30% improvement in standard fusion reactor design. The response was that the current designs have proven stable for thousands of years and changes would require extensive testing by species with more experience. They told me that my genetic therapy proposals needed to be reviewed by the Althery computational systems for potential side effects, Lisa added. When I asked to see the review criteria, they said the algorithms were too complex for human understanding. Emma had been quiet during the conversation, but now she spoke up. "What if they do not want us to improve their technology?" The room fell silent. Reed leaned forward, his expression serious. "Explain." "Look at the patterns," Emma said, activating her own display. Every major Confederation technology reached a certain level of development and then stopped improving. Not because they reached physical limits, but because they reached administrative limits. The bureaucracy that manages technological development is more concerned with stability than advancement. "That is not necessarily sinister," Reed said carefully. "Stability has its advantages." "Agreed. But what if stability is not the goal? What if control is the goal?" Emma pulled up the medical data Lisa had discovered. "The Confederation has the technology to cure diseases that kill millions every year. They choose not to use it. They have reactor designs that could provide abundant energy to every inhabited world. They choose to limit output instead. Why? Because, said a new voice from the doorway, dependent populations are manageable populations. Everyone turned to see Ambassador Fallon entering their quarters. The Vorthic diplomat looked around the room with an expression that might have been sadness if Emma had known how to read his species' emotional cues. Forgive the intrusion, Fallon continued. I use my diplomatic access to override your privacy. Protocols, we need to talk, Reed stood slowly. About what? About the questions your people have been asking. About the improvements you want to make. About the future of human membership in the Confederation. Fallon moved to the center of the room, his gill slits fluttering in what Emma was beginning to recognize as distress. The Council is concerned about human initiative, he said. Not because your ideas are wrong, but because they are right. Your fusion reactor improvements would make energy abundant on worlds that have struggled with scarcity for centuries. Your medical advances would eliminate diseases that certain species use to maintain population control. Your questions about resource allocation would expose distribution systems that benefit some worlds at the expense of others. Emma felt pieces of a massive puzzle clicking into place. The Confederation is not an alliance of equals. No, Fallon sighed quietly. It is a carefully managed hierarchy disguised as an alliance of equals. The founding species maintain control through technological dependence, resource scarcity, and administrative complexity. New species are integrated slowly, taught to work within existing systems rather than innovating beyond them. And humans? Humans are different. You do not accept limitations as natural laws. You see problems as challenges to be solved rather than conditions to be managed. In 6 months, your species has identified improvement opportunities that would destabilize thousands of years of careful control. Reed's expression had shifted from diplomatic neutrality to something much harder. What are you suggesting we do about it? Fallon's gill slits closed completely, a sign that Emma was learning meant fear. I am suggesting you be very careful about which questions you ask out loud, and which improvements you try to implement. The Confederation has dealt with disruptive species before. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of life support. Systems. Emma looked around at her colleagues and saw her own thoughts reflected in their faces. They had joined the galactic community expecting to learn and grow and contribute to the advancement of all sentient life. Instead, they had discovered that advancement was not the goal, control was the goal. And humanity had just become a problem that needed to be managed. The Torvani mining platform Distant Hope had been extracting rare crystals from the asteroid belt of the Kepler-76 system for 800 years. The work was dangerous and the pay was minimal, but the Torvani had always accepted this as their contribution to Confederation prosperity. Their peaceful nature made them ideal workers for hazardous environments where other species might become aggressive or demand better conditions. That was before they started reading human research papers. Foreman Kell watched his workers through the observation deck windows as they finished their shift. The Torvani were natural tunnel builders, their compact bodies and sensitive vibration detection making them perfect for navigating unstable asteroid interiors. For 8 centuries, they had extracted millions of tons of crystals that powered everything from starship computers to planetary defense grids. Last week, Kell had learned that those same crystals sold for prices that would fund his entire mining operation for decades. The Confederation had been paying the Torvani approximately 2% of market value. The revelation had come from an unlikely source. A human trader named Marcus Webb had arrived at Distant Hope with a small cargo ship looking to purchase refined crystals for a human colony that needed computer components. When Kell had quoted the standard Confederation rate, Webb had laughed and offered 10 times as much. You are joking, Webb had said when Kell explained that the Torvani had always received the standard rate. These crystals are worth a fortune on the open market. Who has been buying them from you? The answer was the Alderi Computational Collective. For 800 years, they had purchased Torvani crystals at rates set by the Confederation trade commission, then resold them throughout the galaxy at massive profit margins. The trade commission was run by the Althery. Kel's personal communicator chimed with an incoming message from the mining platform Blue Mountain in the Vega system. His colleague Foreman Dick appeared on the screen, her normally calm features showing. "Unusual agitation. Kel, we need to talk. Privately," she said. "What is wrong?" "I just finished reading a human analysis of Confederation mining operations. Did you know that the Krathan have been stockpiling military-grade crystals for the past 3 centuries? Crystals that are supposed to be restricted for defensive systems only?" Kel felt his tunnel sense tingling, the same instinct that warned him when asteroid walls were about to collapse. "Show me." Dick transmitted the human report. It was written by someone called General Mills, a human military analyst who had been studying Confederation fleet movements. The document was dry and technical, filled with charts and statistics that painted a disturbing picture. The Krathan military had been systematically positioning forces near major crystal mining operations while simultaneously building stockpiles of processed crystals far beyond their stated defensive needs. According to the report, they possessed enough military-grade crystals to power a fleet capable of conquering half the galaxy. "This cannot be accurate," Kel said, but even as he spoke, he remembered things that suddenly made sense. Krathan security. Forces had been increasing their presence at Torvani mining operations for decades, always under the justification of protecting valuable infrastructure. Shipments of processed crystals had been rerouted through Krathan systems for quality control. Before reaching their final destinations, the humans had noticed patterns that the peaceful Torvani had accepted without question. Kel's work shift ended an hour later, but instead of returning to his quarters, he made his way to the communication center. The Torvani had always been connected through the Confederation's standard networks, but recently, human colonies had been establishing independent communication systems. Systems that were not monitored by Althery computational networks, he found. What he was looking for on a human academic network, Dr. Emma Walsh had published a comprehensive analysis of Confederation resource distribution that read like a horror story disguised as economic research. The Althery controlled food distribution to 200 worlds, maintaining artificial scarcity on planets that could be producing surpluses. The Krathan controlled mineral extraction and military resources. The Vorthak managed diplomatic relations that prevented other species from forming independent alliances. Every aspect of Confederation society was designed to maintain the dominance of the founding species while keeping member civilizations dependent and weak. Kel transmitted the information to every Torvani mining platform in the galaxy. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, Torvani miners across dozens of systems were discovering that they had been systematically exploited for centuries. Work stoppages began on platforms that had operated continuously for millennia. Foremen who had never questioned orders started demanding explanations from Confederation officials. The Confederation's response was swift and telling. Instead of addressing Torvani concerns, they dispatched security advisors to mining platforms experiencing worker unrest. These advisors were exclusively Krathan. 3 days after the work stoppages began, Kel received a priority communication from Harmony's Gate. The image that appeared on his screen showed General Ross, the Krathan military commander who served as the Confederation's primary security coordinator. "Foreman Kel," Ross said, his scales shifting to colors that Kel had learned indicated barely controlled aggression. "Your workers have been accessing unauthorized information networks and disrupting critical resource extraction operations. This behavior threatens galactic stability." "We have been accessing human research networks," Kel replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "The same networks that are available to all Confederation members. Human networks that are spreading misinformation designed to destabilize interspecies cooperation," Ross continued. "Your mining platforms are strategic assets. Any disruption of their operations will be considered an act of aggression against the Confederation." Kel felt his tunnel sense screaming warnings. Are you threatening us? I am explaining the consequences of continued disruption. The Torvani have enjoyed Confederation protection for 8 centuries. That protection comes with responsibilities. The transmission ended, leaving Kel staring at a blank screen. The message was clear. Submit or face the consequences. Within hours, reports were flooding in from Torvani platforms throughout the galaxy. Krathan security forces were taking direct control of mining operations. Torvani workers who protested were being detained for counseling. Several platform commanders had been replaced with Krathan military officers. The humans had been right about everything. The Confederation was not an alliance of equals. It was an empire disguised as a democracy, and the founding species were prepared to use force to maintain their control. Kel made a decision that would have been unthinkable a week earlier. He activated the emergency communication system and sent a message to the human colonies. This is Foreman Kel of the Torvani mining platform. Distant Hope. We request political asylum from the Confederation and protection from Krathan military forces. We formally renounce our membership in the Galactic Confederation and request admission to the Human Colonial Alliance. Similar messages were being transmitted from Torvani platforms across the galaxy. The humans had given them more than better prices for their crystals. They had given them the truth about their situation and the courage to act on that knowledge. The peaceful Torvani, who had never started a war in their species' recorded history, had just declared independence from the galactic government. The Confederation would not let them go. Quietly, Kel watched through his observation windows as Krathan warships began appearing in the asteroid belt around Distant Hope. The Empire was about to show its true face, and the galaxy would never be the same. The humans had not just asked uncomfortable questions. They had provided answers that made continued submission impossible. The truth was out, and truth was the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. Fleet Admiral Torres had commanded starships for 30 years, but she had never seen anything like the tactical situation developing around the Kepler-76 system. Her display showed 17 different species vessels in various states of combat readiness, alliance, and outright hostility. What had started as a Torvani labor dispute was rapidly becoming the largest military confrontation in galactic history. The Krathan battle fleet had moved to secure the mining platforms 3 days ago. Standard procedure for maintaining order during civil unrest, according to their communications. The humans had responded by sending a protective convoy to evacuate Torvani civilians who requested asylum. Also standard procedure. According to human colonial law, when the Krathan had fired on the human evacuation ships, standard procedures became irrelevant. Admiral, incoming transmission from the Confederation Council, reported Communications Officer Blake from her station. Put them through. The main display activated, showing the emergency council session in progress at Harmony's Gate. Ambassador Thalen appeared to be arguing with General Ross while representatives from dozens of species shouted over each other. In the background, the careful diplomatic protocols that had maintained galactic peace for 3 millennia were collapsing in real time. Admiral Torres, came the voice of Counselor Prime Vex, an Aldari whose computational network managed most Confederation administrative functions. You will immediately withdraw human vessels from the Kepler-76 system and cease interference with Confederation security operations. Counselor, Torres replied, we are conducting humanitarian evacuations of civilians requesting political asylum. This is legal under both human and Confederation law. The Torvani are Confederation citizens. They cannot request asylum from themselves. They can when their own government is shooting at them. The display erupted in chaos as multiple council members began speaking simultaneously. Torres caught fragments of arguments in a dozen different languages before the transmission cut to a private channel. Ambassador Thalen appeared alone, his gill slits fluttering rapidly. Admiral, you must understand the situation. The Krathan are claiming that human interference has created a galactic security crisis. They are demanding authorization to use whatever force is necessary to restore order, and the Council is terrified. Half the species are discovering that their resource agreements have been manipulated for centuries. The other half are learning that their military protection has been conditional on maintaining those same agreements. Everyone is questioning everything. Torres studied her tactical display. Krathan warships were now surrounding mining platforms in 37 different systems. The Torvani were not the only species experiencing security interventions. Reports were coming in of Krathan forces moving to secure critical infrastructure throughout Confederation space. Thalen, how many species are currently under Krathan protection? By my count, about 200. All the mining worlds, agricultural planets, and manufacturing centers that supply resources to the rest of the Confederation. And how many of those worlds requested that protection? Thalen's silence was answer enough. Torres made a decision that she knew would change everything. Blake, open a channel to all human colonies and any allied vessels in the area. Channel open, Admiral. This is Fleet Admiral Torres to all human and allied forces. The Confederation has revealed its true nature as a military occupation disguised as a voluntary alliance. Effective immediately, the Human Colonial Alliance considers itself at war with the Krathan Empire and any forces acting under their authority. All human vessels are authorized to use necessary force to protect civilian populations and maintain freedom of navigation. The response was immediate. Human ships throughout the galaxy began transmitting similar declarations. But they were not alone. The Torvani mining platforms had been joined by Nerian aquatic colonies, Vorthic diplomatic stations, and a dozen other species who had discovered uncomfortable truths about their place in the Confederation. Admiral, Blake called out, we are receiving a priority transmission from General Ross himself. Let me guess, surrender or face destruction? Actually, he wants to negotiate, Torres raised an eyebrow. The Krathan were not known for negotiation once they committed to military action. Put him through. General Ross appeared on screen, his scales showing colors that Torres had learned indicated resignation mixed with determination. Behind him, she could see the bridge of a massive Krathan battleship surrounded by similar vessels. Admiral Torres, this is unfortunate. Yes, it is. The Confederation has maintained galactic peace for 3,000 years. Your species has been members for less than 2 years, and you have managed to destabilize everything we have built. We ask questions, that is all. Questions have consequences. The Torvani work in dangerous conditions because someone must extract the crystals that power galactic civilization. The Nerians live in isolation because their population growth is unsustainable. The agricultural worlds maintain production quotas because billions depend on reliable food supplies. Your questions are destroying systems that keep trillions alive. Torres felt a chill as she realized what Ross was really saying. You are willing to let people die to maintain control. I am willing to make hard choices to prevent galactic collapse. The Confederation is not perfect, but it works. Your alliance offers nothing but chaos. We offer freedom. Freedom to starve, freedom to fight over resources, freedom to repeat every mistake that led to the creation of the Confederation in the first place. Ross leaned forward, his expression serious. Admiral, you still have time to reverse this. Withdraw your support for the rebel worlds. Help us restore order. The Confederation is willing to make concessions about human autonomy if you stop encouraging others to break their obligations. Torres looked at her tactical display again. The Krathan had overwhelming military superiority. Their technology was more advanced, their numbers were larger, and they had been preparing for this conflict for centuries. The smart move would be to negotiate. To accept limited autonomy in exchange for ending the resistance. She thought about the Torvani, miners who had spent 8 centuries being systematically exploited. About the Nerian colonies that had been prevented from developing their own space technology. About the human scientists who had been told to stop trying to cure diseases because it would disrupt administrative procedures. General Ross, I have a counter-proposal. I am listening. Surrender immediately. Release all occupied worlds, dissolve the Krathan military command structure, and submit to trial for crimes against sapient species. Ross's scales shifted to deep black. That is not acceptable. Then we have nothing to discuss. The transmission ended. Torres turned to her communications officer. Blake, transmit our tactical analysis to all allied forces. Full data sharing. On Krathan fleet positions, capabilities, and likely strategies. Aye, Admiral. Within minutes, Torres watched as the human information sharing network spread tactical intelligence to resistance forces throughout the galaxy. It was a level of cooperation that the Confederation had never achieved despite centuries of unity. The humans were not just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for every species that had been told to accept limitation as natural law. The war would be brutal. The Krathan had superior technology and numbers. Many worlds would be devastated before it ended. Billions might die, but for the first time in 3 millennia, every species in the galaxy would have the chance to choose their own future. Even if that choice came at the end of a laser cannon. Torres looked out at the stars and wondered if freedom was worth the price they were about to pay. Then she remembered the Torvani workers she had evacuated, seeing open space for the first time in their lives, and decided that some questions answered themselves. The galaxy was burning, but from the ashes, something new might grow. Something that valued truth over stability and freedom over peace. The humans had not started this war, but they were going to finish it. Captain Reed stood in the ruins of what had once been the Confederation's greatest administrative center on Proxima Centauri. 5 years of war had reduced the gleaming towers to twisted metal and broken dreams. Children from 17 different species played in the rubble, their laughter echoing off walls that had once housed the bureaucracy that controlled 1,000 worlds. The war was over. Not because anyone had won, but because there was nothing left to fight for. The Krathan Empire controlled roughly half of inhabited space through military occupation. Their forces maintained order through fear and superior firepower, providing security and stability to worlds that had chosen submission over starvation. The territories under their control were efficiently managed, well-fed, and completely subjugated. The remaining worlds had formed loose alliances based on voluntary cooperation rather than enforced unity. The Charter of Free Worlds that Reed had helped draft guaranteed self-determination and mutual aid, but it could not guarantee prosperity or peace. Some worlds thrived under the new system, developing technologies and cultures that had been suppressed for millennia. Others struggled without the infrastructure the Confederation had provided. Reed's personal communicator chimed with a message from Dr. Emma Walsh. Her research station in the Vega system had successfully developed treatments for 12 previously incurable diseases. The treatments were being distributed freely to any world that requested them, regardless of political alignment. It was exactly the kind of breakthrough that the old Confederation would have controlled and rationed. Another message came from Admiral Torres. The human fleet had intercepted a Krathan convoy attempting to reclaim a Torvani mining platform. No shots had been fired, but the convoy had withdrawn after being confronted with overwhelming Allied forces. It was the kind of border skirmish that happened weekly throughout contested space. Reed walked through the makeshift settlement that had grown up around the ruins. Humans worked alongside Torvani engineers to build new housing. Nerian traders sold seafood to Vorthek diplomats. Former Confederation administrators taught alien children about democratic governance while learning new concepts of individual rights from human teachers. It was chaotic, inefficient, and completely unpredictable. It was also alive in ways that the old Confederation had never been. "Captain Reed," called a familiar voice. Reed turned to see Ambassador Thallon approaching through the crowd. The Vorthek diplomat looked older, his scales showing the stress patterns that his species displayed after prolonged conflict. He had been one of the few Confederation officials to side with the resistance, and the decision had cost him everything he had spent his career building. "Thallon, how are the negotiations progressing?" "Slowly, the Krathan are willing to discuss prisoner exchanges and trade agreements, but they refuse to acknowledge the legitimacy of the Charter of Free Worlds. They still consider all non-Krathan territories to be in rebellion against lawful authority." Reed was not surprised. The Krathen had committed too much to their vision of galactic order to abandon it now. Their military government provided stability and security to billions of people who had chosen predictable oppression over uncertain freedom. What about the Aldery? The computational collective has fragmented into hundreds of smaller networks. Some provide services to Krathen territories, others work with free world alliances, and a few have gone completely independent. Their monopoly on information processing is broken, but so is their ability to provide galaxy-wide coordination, Reed nodded. The collapse of Aldery computational networks had been one of the most immediate consequences of the war. Worlds that had depended on centralized systems for everything from weather prediction to supply chain management had been forced to develop local alternatives. The results were mixed at best. They walked together toward the memorial that had been built where the Confederation Council chambers once stood. The simple stone monument listed the names of every species that had been members of the old alliance, along with a single line of text in each of their languages. The human translation read, "They sought unity and achieved control. We seek freedom and accept chaos. Do you ever regret it?" Thalen asked. Reed considered the question carefully. The galaxy was more violent now than it had been under Confederation rule. Trade was less efficient, communication was more difficult, and the constant threat of conflict made long-term planning nearly impossible. Millions had died in the war, and millions more struggled with the aftermath, but the Torvani now controlled their own mining operations and received fair payment for their labor. The Nerian colonies were developing their own space technology and expanding their population without artificial restrictions. Human scientists shared their research freely with anyone who wanted it, leading to breakthroughs that would have taken the old Confederation centuries to approve. A group of children ran past them, chasing a ball made from salvaged metal. Reed watched a young Torvani girl tackle a human boy twice her size, both of them laughing as they tumbled into the dust. Their parents watched from nearby, talking in a mixture of languages that would have horrified Confederation linguists but somehow worked perfectly for daily communication. "Look at them," Reed said. "When was the last time you saw Torvani children playing above ground? When did Nerian families last live outside designated aquatic zones? When did humans get to share their culture without being told it was too disruptive for galactic harmony?" Thalen's gill slits fluttered, and what Reed had learned was his species' equivalent of a sigh. The old system prevented wars. No, it prevented change. There is a difference. They continued walking through the settlement. Reed noticed that the architecture was completely unlike anything the Confederation had ever built. Human engineering principles mixed with Torvani tunnel craft and Nerian fluid dynamics to create buildings that were both functional and beautiful. Each structure was unique, designed by local builders using local materials and local knowledge. It was the opposite of Confederation standardization, and it worked. "The Krathen territories are more prosperous," Thalen said. "Their worlds have better infrastructure, more reliable food distribution, and lower crime rates. And no freedom to choose their own path," Reed replied. "Prosperity without choice is just comfortable slavery." They reached the communication center that served as the settlement's connection to the wider galaxy. Reed's daily reports were transmitted from here to human colonies throughout free world space. Today's report would include updates on 17 different research projects, negotiations with 12 potential new alliance members, and coordination of relief efforts for worlds still recovering from the war. The old Confederation would have managed all of this through centralized bureaucracy that took months to make decisions. The free worlds managed it through voluntary cooperation that sometimes succeeded and sometimes failed spectacularly. "Captain," called out Communications Officer Blake from her workstation. "Incoming priority transmission from the Krathen Empire. General Ross wants to speak with you directly." Reed exchanged glances with Thalen. Direct communication between free world and Krathen leadership was rare and usually meant something significant was happening. "Put him through." General Ross appeared on the main display, looking exactly as he had 5 years ago except for new scars across his scales that told stories of recent battles. Behind him, Reed could see the bridge of a Krathan command ship surrounded by the orderly efficiency that characterized their military operations. Captain Reed, Ambassador Thalen. General Ross, this is unexpected. The Krathan High Command has a proposal. We are willing to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Charter of Free Worlds. Limited trade agreements, prisoner exchanges, and territorial recognition. Reed felt Thalen tense beside him. Recognition from the Krathan Empire would legitimize the free worlds in ways that could reshape galactic politics. What do you want in return? Reed asked. Information. Your research networks have developed technologies that could benefit Krathan territories. Medical advances, agricultural techniques, industrial processes. We are willing to trade Krathan military technology for civilian innovations. You want to trade weapons for medicine? We want to trade security for progress. The Krathan Empire provides stability. The free worlds provide innovation. Perhaps we can find ways to cooperate without destroying each other. Reed considered the offer. Access to Krathan technology would accelerate free world development by decades. But it would also legitimize the Krathan system of military control. I will need to consult with the other charter members, Reed said finally. Of course, but Captain, consider this. The galaxy is large enough for multiple approaches to civilization. The Krathan way provides security and order. The human way provides freedom and innovation. Perhaps both have value. The transmission ended, leaving Reed staring at a blank screen. Thalen moved to stand beside him, both of them lost in thought. What do you think? Reed asked. I think the humans have accomplished something remarkable. You have proven that alternatives to the Confederation are possible. But you have also proven that those alternatives come with costs, Reed nodded. The free worlds were messier, more dangerous and less predictable than the old Confederation. They were also more creative, more dynamic, and more alive. Thalen, do you believe we made the right choice? The Vorthic diplomat was quiet for a long moment, watching the children play in the ruins of the old order. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had lost everything and found something unexpected in return. I believe you gave us a choice. For 3,000 years, no one in the galaxy had a real choice about how to live. The Confederation provided one option: submit and be managed. You showed us that other options were possible. Reed looked out at the settlement one more time. It was not perfect, it was not even particularly efficient. But it was free, and that made all the difference. The humans had not intended to destroy the Galactic Confederation. They had simply refused to accept that the way things were was the way things had to be. That refusal had cost the galaxy its peace, but it had given every species something that had been missing for millennia: the right to choose their own future, even if that future was uncertain. Reed smiled as he watched. A group of engineers from 5 different species argue about the best way to build a water recycling system. They would probably spend hours debating and testing different approaches before reaching a solution that satisfied everyone. The old Confederation would have imposed a standard design and been done in minutes. But the free worlds had time for debate, time for experimentation, and time for the messy process of figuring things out together. It was chaos. It was inefficient. It was exactly what freedom looked like. And Reed would not trade it for all the stability in the galaxy.